Welcome to Don't Turn Around, a podcast about the extraordinary and the unexplained and the profound impact these events can have on our lives. This is a place for the extraordinary and for the unexplained and for amazing stories. If you've got a story of your own and you'd like to share it, don't hesitate to shoot me an email at dtapodcastinfo@gmail.com. If you're enjoying Don't Turn Around, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, a follow, a like on social media. It all helps. It all helps build this community, helps get the show out to as many folks as possible. That's enough rambling on from me. You may recognize tonight's guest from the Travel Channel's The Dead Files, The Holzer Files, which was one of my personal favorites, Ghost of Devil's Perch, and a regular guest on Jack Osborne's Ghosts and Grit, which is also just fantastic. She is an intuitive, a psychic medium, a teacher, a student, a poised investigator, and has an unmatched fashion sense. Cindy Kaza, welcome to Don't Turn Around.
Thank you. Oh, if I would have known you would have sent unmatched fashion sense, I would have presented myself a little bit more glamorously, you know?
No, all the looks you pull off. You pull off with grace.
Thank you.
Welcome so much to the show. I am so excited to have the chance to chat with you today. As I mentioned, I first came across you on the Holzer Files and was just instantly drawn in just by how you interacted with the investigators, how you approached the different spaces and the different energies. It was in a way that was very accessible, very calm, and in a way that was just very relatable.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so thank you for portraying that. I think when people hear the term psychic or the term medium or intuitive or all of it together, there's some misconceptions. I think people have the Hollywood view of what it could mean, and then what other, any other preconceived notions. And I feel that you were just such a fine example of, no, it could be the person sitting across from you on the train. It could be your next door neighbor. It could be your boss. I mean, just everyday people that are tuned in to these extraordinary gifts. And for you, I know it began somewhat early on in your life, and I would love to hear more about how it all kind of began for you.
Yeah, well, I've always had this ability. And first of all, let me just say this because I really mean it. Everybody has this ability to a degree. Every human being has the ability to feel these energies. I actually prefer to call them frequencies at this point.
I love that. Yes.
Because I think everything is sound and I think everything is happening right now. So past, present, and future are accessible to all of us as a frequency now. And I'll get to that a little bit more on that later. But I just want people to understand that I don't necessarily think I'm like this unique being with this magical ability. It's like it's more like, yes, I'm more tapped in than a lot of people, but that doesn't mean that other people don't have it, and we all have it. So the first experience I remember having was when I was 10. I was really young, and I saw a dead girl standing next to my bed, full body apparition. And normally I don't see spirits that way. In fact, as an adult, I rarely see full body apparitions. I think I've seen one since that age, at age 10, right? So usually it's we're more subtle. It's feeling, hearing, seeing, knowing, right?
Yeah.
But it took me a long time to understand what was happening to me, because I didn't have anybody to talk to about my abilities. I grew up in a religious family, a lot of Catholics in my family. So I didn't know what a psychic medium was. I didn't know what intuition was. I didn't know any of that. So then, but I knew that I was sensitive. I was a very sensitive child. My mom would always say to people, Cindy's really sensitive. She knows things about people, so it's always really heightened in me. And it wasn't until my 20s that I really decided to, put one foot in front of the other and figure out what was going on with me. And then I just didn't look back. But it wasn't as if at age 10, I knew I'm going to be a psychic medium.
Right.
Like that was so far out of my scope. I thought I was going to be a musician. I mean, that was my first love. I was playing in bars when I was 15 and 16 and in a band for 7 years. And so my intention my whole life was to be a musician. And now I talk to dead people. So, I mean, right?
Yeah.
Well, I
No.
want to say, I think musicians and artists and people that are very creative are super tapped in naturally. I mean, like when people say, I don't know how I wrote that song in 3 minutes. I'm like, yeah, I do, you know? So there's something there, I think too. And some of our, what was it? The DNA electrophoresis. It's like what
Yeah.
that was discovered by a scientist eating mushrooms and going into the woods, and he figured out how to
Yes.
do it. Right.
Yes. Right.
So what is he tapping into? Right. So I love science too. By the way, so I do love art and music, but I also have a lot of experience with science and studying science in college and stuff, biology and chemistry and stuff like that. So it's everywhere. This energy is accessible to everyone all the time. It's influenced a lot of the things that have been some of the greatest discoveries, I think, of mankind. Can I prove that? No, but I feel like it's there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just I think unfortunately the way we see things in Hollywood, like it's all usually scary, or we're seeing some demonic force, or it looks like the medium can only see full body apparitions, and that the medium can't tell the difference between somebody who's alive or dead. And it's really just not like that. It's entirely more subtle.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
No, I mean, and it all just the science, and then it all coexists, like you said. The biochemistry of what's happening in our brains essentially, is a response to stimuli, and it's like you said, it's these frequencies that are there, and they're always there, and we are built to a degree to pick up on them. So you said you embraced this in your 20s. Was there any one moment or something that happened that caused that turn for you, where you decided that this was something that you had to know more about, had to know what was going on? What was that experience?
I mean, there wasn't just one experience. I think it was, well, I'll say this. And when I was 19, this woman, I met this woman named Bonnie. Her spiritual name was Raven. She was like a pagan. She dressed like a witch. At this time, I was not planning on being a psychic medium. And she was like an aunt to me, kind of, right? Like it's so crazy because I went to University of New Hampshire for a year. I'm from New Hampshire. So I move into this apartment. I wasn't living in the dorms. I'm in this apartment, and there's like 3 units in the building, and she's in the unit next to mine, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, siren. Is that loud?
That's okay.
It's Brooklyn. Okay, so so that's what you got. So on her door there was a placard that said, "Come in for a witch's spell" or something. I'm like, who is this lady? Long story short, we wind up meeting. And she looks at me and she goes, "You're a psychic medium." I was like, "What are you talking about?" Now, fast forward, it turns out she actually lived in the town that I grew up in, which was 2 hours away from the town that we met in. And her daughter went to high school with my brother, right? And so I'm like, this is weird. So she was the first person to really see it in me and be like, "You're a psychic medium." And it took me still years to really figure out what was going on, right?
Yeah.
So she passed away in 2011. I consider her my first mentor. She really did see that in me. And so from there, it gave me, kind of the courage, and also it sparked my curiosity and like, okay, what does she mean by that, and where is this going? And then I started reading more about metaphysics, and I went and saw a medium work, do a platform event, which is what I do when I tour. You stand on a stage, you bring through messages. And I was like, oh, interesting. It's like, I wonder if I could do that. Like, I feel like, so then I started learning about that, and then it just happened. So it's like all of these things had to kind of line up. I also had to quit drinking. So that's part of my story. Like for years I drank because I think I was trying to squash my sensitivity, but luckily I quit very young at 23. And so it was kind of after I did that, then also I had to deal with all the sensitivities again because I didn't have anything to push them away. Right? So some things had to line up before I was really ready to go forward with this part of who I am. And it wasn't easy. I mean, it's been a wild journey. The journey was way more fun than the destination. I promise you, and it's been wild.
I believe that. And in terms of opening yourself up to it, I learned a term just yesterday. I don't know if you're familiar with Brene Brown.
Oh, I love her. I've been listening to her a lot lately. Yeah.
So my therapist recommended a TED Talk, and where she was talking about excruciating vulnerability.
Yeah.
Which I feel like vulnerability is such a big part of truly exploring the paranormal.
Oh, for
and
sure.
as I could only imagine, is a huge part of what you do and of you tapping into these gifts. And I'm sure it was a challenge, right? Approaching that vulnerability and being able to put yourself in that place. What was that like? How did you push through to be able to be that vulnerable?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I love Brene Brown too. It's funny. I've been listening to her podcast a lot. It's called whatever it's called. Oh crap. Now I have to plug it. Just sorry, give me a second.
Plug it.
It's called oh come on, where is it? Unlocking Us.
Yes.
It's very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Brene Brown, Unlocking Us. Okay, so yeah, honestly, I was less afraid of tapping into the spirit world than I was of telling people in the living that I'm a psychic medium.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was scary. That was really scary.
Oh yeah.
It's like, everybody has this idea, not everybody, a lot of people believe that people that can connect to spirits are mentally ill or we're crazy or we're fake or whatever. So like when you put yourself out there as a psychic medium, it all of these feelings come up of, oh no, how am I going to appear? Are people not going to like me? Are people going to call me crazy? And really pushing that I found was more challenging than connecting to the spirit world.
Absolutely.
I'm way more afraid of people in the living than I am of this people.
Yeah. Well, we have these connections we value with the people that we love and that have, we think, a certain understanding of who we are, and that's how they base their love on is what they understand of who we are.
Yeah.
But rather, in most cases, for the people that really count in our lives, they are accepting the whole package, that which they know and that which they don't know. But I get that. I mean, when my parents always knew that I was into the paranormal, and since I was a kid, I never would have guessed personally that I would have started in becoming an investigator and a researcher. And I was a little unsure when I told them initially that I was going to be going off to these abandoned places and connecting and figuring this all out. And they were actually very, very interested in it and have been interested in it since. So people will surprise you in just wonderful and unexpected ways. And I think, at least for me, I don't want to say it validates experiences that I've had in the past or that I will have, but it makes it feel more complete as part of my life when maybe my sisters might not go out on an investigation with me, but they're open to hearing about it, and we'll talk about things that happened to us when we were kids that we experienced. So it's there's so many layers to who we are as individuals, and this is just, as for you, another aspect of self. We are comprised of so many different aspects. We're like these beautiful
internal family systems. Internal family systems. This is my working idea now about mediumship and paranormal investigations and all this stuff, right? So internal family systems, for people that are listening that don't understand it, basically, I'm just going to really summarize very quickly. Like we have many different parts, and which part is showing up in which situation and why, which part is running the show. But that one part does not define our entire being, right? Because we have a tendency to look at things from a place of good and bad, like a duality is always duality. And there's a lot of gray. There's a lot of other stuff going on here.
Gray.
Right. So when I started, really diving into mediumship, I was of the mindset that you go to the other side and that there's a level or layer, and you're in the layer or level which you choose to be in, and that, all these things still in duality, still putting time and space in the same kind of continuum as they exist in this the dimension or this place, which it's not like that. So it's different, right? And then when I started doing paranormal investigation, and mind you, paranormal investigation came years after I was already touring, doing live events.
Yeah.
And honestly, if it hadn't been for Holzer Files, I probably wouldn't have done it, because I wasn't really about like the whole let's scare everyone, everything's evil. Like I didn't like that. Really was like, this is not reality, right? This is not my experience. Let me say, it's not my experience.
Yes.
Okay. Because I
Yes,
think
of course.
you can have the experience which you set out to have, and that will influence your connection to this, to
Intention.
the
Yes.
frequency, right?
Intention, right? Yeah.
So, but Holzer Files was unique for me in terms of a paranormal show, because the premise was, Hans Holzer's cases, and also, his love for mediums and how useful mediums could be in an investigation. So when I heard that part of it, I was like, I'm in, right? And right. And so then when I started doing paranormal investigations, it still was confusing because I was having these experiences, and I was like, okay, yeah, there is a man here who is unhappy. I feel his energy. I'm getting things about him that I couldn't have possibly known, had no knowledge coming in. But then how does that work? Like how does that work in the sense of, when we research near-death experiences, and especially that book Dying to Be Me by Anita Moorjani. I talk about it a lot because it's a great book. It's an easy read. But she dies. She's able to be in 5 different places at once. She comes back and talks about it, right? So sorry, I have ADHD. So it's
No, this is great because
weird, but I promise I'll tie it up.
and I'm with you. It's like a pinball in my brain, because now I'm thinking of all the 9,000 different directions that I could go in at any moment.
Okay. So then it's like, okay, so right. I believe that, I have to listen to Anita Moorjani's experience and other people that have had near-death experiences. And also, it doesn't make sense that the entirety of a soul would be damned to a haunted house for eternity. That's doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And it's so what is actually happening here, right? And so then I finished my degree in social psychology. And anyway, and then I was reading a little bit about internal family systems and parts, and then a lot of people in the New Age community will take people through these guided meta visualizations to retrieve a part that fragmented off. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that makes sense for the spirit world. It's got to be like, I was like, I want to do internal family systems for the spirit world, because it's like, look, when I'm in a location investigating and I feel a part of the soul that's fragmented off because it's traumatized, it has unfinished business, it's angry, right? It needs love, it needs attention, it wants to be heard. And it wants to be, in my opinion, reintegrated to the oneness, to the wholeness. It doesn't mean that there's not another part of that same spirit connecting to another medium somewhere else in the world.
Yes.
And why can my part understand that part? And where is that connection? Because this is the other thing that I firmly believe, and I tell my students this. We have to be open to experiencing all of these different parts of these different spirits. And if you are afraid to talk to somebody who was murdered because that situation feels too scary for you, you're probably not going to encounter that part. And if you did, you might push it away because you're not ready to encounter it.
Right. And I think at the same time too, and I had this discussion with a dear friend of mine who passed away unexpectedly almost 2 years ago now.
Sorry, yeah.
But thank you. It was about the multiple aspects of self and how that plays into our perceived reality as we experience it as living beings. But at the same time, I'm trying to figure out how to just phrase it that our living selves and living consciousness can also simultaneously exist at this point in time. 10 years ago when this was happening, and that was now, and I felt this strong emotion, and then something that hasn't happened yet, because I think we can comfortably say time is very likely not linear, and
It's
that
not,
and then when you factor in quantum mechanics into everything, and points existing independently yet connected, it adds up in a way that I find extremely compelling and that I don't understand, that hurts my head, but at the same time, gives me peace.
It's fun. It hurts my head too. And I think I tell people, look, the beauty is in the mystery. Like it's we're not allowed to fully understand it. I don't know that we can fully comprehend it because, you know, we in the existence that we're in this space and time that I'm talking to you, we have to have an opposite of something to understand something else. It has to be in duality. That's how we're having this experience here, right? So how do you know what light is if you don't have dark? How do you know what happy is if you don't have sad? It feels like everything would just be void. Then you go into the void, what nothing, there's no meaning to any of it, right? So we're here to make meaning of our experiences. We're here to grow and learn, right? And it's very difficult for people to comprehend things outside of that paradigm, right? Even when I'm communicating with the spirit world and I'm saying, hey, your father's here, he died of cancer. I'm hearing the name, you know, Joseph. This is an example. Like, do I see somebody's father standing in front of me as a full body apparition? Like, no, but I know the frequency. I sense the frequency. Yeah. That frequency has information, and that information, you know, should make sense to the person I'm talking to. But if I don't give it thought or form, or I don't give it some sort of and even for me to understand it, it needs that, right? So it's like, there's so much we don't know. There's so much we don't know. And I'm okay with that. I am the type of medium that is like, look, like, I'm sure when I die, I'll be like, got that wrong. I'm okay with that.
Wrong. You know? I'm wrong all the time. And I'm okay with that.
And it is what it is, you know? It's like, yeah.
So let me ask you this. In terms of when you are experiencing that frequency from someone that's passed on, and so you are seeing what their past experiences had been, and you're able to visualize that, are you able to tap into what they're currently experiencing as reality and existence?
Yes. It's kind of interesting. Well, I'll say this is what I've experienced on a more regular basis from people I'm communicating with in the spirit world. So like, if I'm giving a message to somebody in a lot of in my live events, right? Sometimes I'll see something like this. Like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Okay, yeah. So there's one example where I brought through this young man who had died from a drug overdose, and I was giving a message to his mother, and you know, he was going through all of the amends he wanted to make and talking about all the things, and then he showed me that his job on the other side is to help people who have also died from drug addiction kind of navigate their first kind of introduction. Like, they'll be there with family, but then he's like, hey, I'm going to help you understand the ropes here because you died the same way I did, right? Things like that, or people watching out for kids. There's another really good example. Who the heck? This is not from me. This is from one of my friends who, I can't remember which one of my friends was telling me the story. My friend was doing a reading for somebody, and the grandmother came through. Now, when the grandmother was alive, this was a long time ago, the grandmother was part of helping women who needed to have abortions, but it was like back alley abortions, right?
Ooh, yeah.
So there were like people that got sick and died, right? The woman who was in the living receiving the message was actually a nurse who helped bring babies she worked in nurse pediatrics or delivery.
Yeah.
So do you see this interesting cycle of like connection, and how now the grandmother was like, my purpose now is to help you in your job, because what she was doing back then, it was really dangerous, right? And
and the interconnectivity. I'm a big Stephen King fan. I
love Stephen King.
He is right there on my wall. The Dark Tower series, one thing I really loved about it was this concept of Ka and this wheel, and it is endless, and it is continually moving forward, and all the different permutations. And it just, again, we're just touching the surface with these beautiful concepts, and we might get there, like you said, and it's way different than we considered it to be, and way more amazing. I do wonder too, though, in almost silly kind of a way, when we pass on, do we retain our senses? Would I be sitting across from you, and I could see your hair is brown, and your lips are pink, and it smells like lavender today, and it's cold in here because the air conditioner is too high. What do you think of that? Because again, that is very much based in our physical reality,
here, right? I mean, so I don't think it's the same. Again, I still think everything's like a frequency. Mm-hmm. Everything is, and I got this in automatic writing years ago, that everything was sound. And I was like, what does that mean? And then Matthias De Stefano, or Stefano, however you pronounce his last name, it's a guy who has a show in Gaia, was doing a podcast and he was talking about dimensions. And he's like, dimensions aren't dimensions in the sense of like space. He said, everything's a frequency, and we're able to shift our awareness to different frequencies. I was like, oh my God, that makes sense, because it's like everything is sound. So within these frequencies, within the notes, right? So if you, maybe it's like this, maybe it's like the soul is made as an orchestra. It's all these different notes. And we
I
can
love
put
that.
our awareness to one note in the orchestra. And in that one note, there's a lot of information, right? But why that one note in this exact moment? That's the better question.
Yes, 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 yes. Or why is there a rest there?
Exactly.
It's and
And then the one note joins another orchestra and another time, and another note from that same soul goes to another orchestra. And there are all these orchestras happening at the same time. So pieces of us can be playing in different orchestras.
oh, I love that. I love that. I'm a musician as well. By the way, I played in bands for
Mhm.
many years. Songwriter, etc. And that concept of frequency and vibration has always been one that really struck close to home. One of my very first episodes, I was interviewing this gentleman, Timothy Renner, who lives in Pennsylvania. He is just incredible artist, incredible podcaster. He's an author. He is an experiencer. He is just a well-rounded, just really neat individual. And we were talking about the concept of sound and the concept of vibration, and even just thinking of it as guitar strings and how they
Mhm.
vibrate at a different rate depending on the thickness of the string, and it just seems to be the one that fits for me, and it sounds like the one
Yeah.
that fits for you. And I
Yeah.
was thinking the other day too, you hear a song and you can't put your finger on what it is about this particular song, but your hairs stand on end. You get the chills. You feel genuinely moved. It touches you deeply. And you can't, as far as I know, maybe there is more science to it than I'm privy to, but how do you explain that? And how that could be the case for one person, but not for another person?
Yeah.
Or two people it can be the case for, right? And they are having that same experience in that same moment. I can't tell you how many nights that I've been in the car with my daughters, and we won't get out of the car until the song is over, because we have to hear it through to the end. And it just, again, where I don't understand where the science is of that, because there's
Yeah,
so
I
much
don't,
happening.
I'm not versed in that, but there's sound healing. There's
Hmm.
a lot of stuff with sound and music and how it can heal and create, healing in the brain and maybe new connections in the brain. The brain is
Yes,
neuroplasticity, right?
neuroplasticity. That's right. That's
So
right.
it's like there's that piece, but I also, in maybe a more mystical or spiritual component to that, could be thought of like from Sufi thought about how when we quote unquote reincarnate, right? Um, we're coming through all the layers of everything that ever was and ever will be. So we have all of those things inside of us, right? Everything that ever was, ever will be, and is, and we can access those places, right? It's inside of us, right? Or it's the same as the Rumi. We're not a drop of water in the ocean; we're an entire ocean in a drop, or something like that, right?
Yeah, right, right.
Where I'm going with that is like, if that's true, and you're in a moment listening to this song that like activates this sense of like presence or oneness or emotion, who's to say you're not connecting into the person who wrote that song or somebody else who's experiencing that same song or had experienced that song and had a deep
Yeah.
because we're connected. There's no separation from anything that we're experiencing in anybody, right? That's the joke. Like that's the cruel joke of being in this dimension is like, I'm separate, I'm unique, I'm sad, I'm lonely, nobody gets
Right.
me. It's like, it's a fun story to tell ourselves, but my reality, I'm not going to say the reality, my
Right.
reality now is that uh, trying to move away from that separation or that feeling of separation is the key to really feeling happy and feeling present.
Yeah. And that is a word that I'm a big fan of present, the concept of being present, which I can only imagine. And as I've even heard you describe, being present as someone who is a sensitive, intuitive, psychic medium, yada, yada, yada,
Yeah.
being present is really invaluable. It's critical. And I know you've described that as it is for everyone, being present can be a challenge. And how has that evolved for you? This
Oh gosh.
concept of being present. Where are you on that journey?
Oh my God. It's a daily reprieve. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
man, I'll tell you, the happiest moments for me have been when I've been truly present, because in that space, everything's okay. You don't want for anything. You don't need anything. You're connected to everything around you. You don't feel that painful sense of separation, right? Um, let's see that God, I'll tell you that the over in the period of my life, like really understanding what it meant to be present. I'm still working on it, but what has really thrown me out of presence the most is scarcity mindset, feeling like I don't have enough, feeling like I have to be this worker bee in the hive of the capitalist society, blah blah blah. Don't get me wrong, I love that I can work and make money and all those things. And also, like, when we're surrounded by things showing us that we need more, this will make us happy. If I looked like this, it would be this, like all of this BS that keeps us really out of presence, because when we're seeing all of that around us, we're never present with who we are, what we have. We're always saying, I need this, I want more. What if this? I'm afraid I can't retire. Oh, I'm going to get sick. Oh my God. It's like fear mongering, right? And that is the antithesis of presence, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know for me, my biggest challenge with being present is I will get, and then depending on where I am, emotionally, I will get fixated on time in the sense that if I don't finish this by 7 past the hour, then I won't have 13 minutes to go do this. And then another 20 minutes that I need to take care of this. And not only does it yank me out of being present, it will effectively paralyze me and I won't do any of those things.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the key to achieving presence is just to find that little bit of space between those thoughts that start
It's
spiraling.
the space between, right? It's the space between. And even in mediumship, when it's like I'm filming for a show, right? And I have to do the walk, this, and I have no information prior to going into any of these walks. So it's like nerve wracking because I have cameras in my face. This is going to be on national television. I'm like, oh God, if I don't do a good job, I'm not going to have a job. And then this and this. So having to like have all of that stuff inside of me while trying to be present and show up for the spirit world, it is really challenging. And I think I got to a point where I was like, you know what? It's going to be what it's going to be, and I can't change it. I might as well just show up and just have fun with it,
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same thing when going out on an investigation. You get, as an investigator, you might get hung up on, I want to make sure that I'm using this piece of equipment. Oh, I just got this piece of equipment. I want to make sure I'm using that. And, oh, we're streaming this. So I want to make sure that we're not distracted by the stream. And, oh, we only have 4 hours here before they're going to kick us out. And that nothing will separate you from connecting with that greater other than being fixated on all those things that are really,
really unfortunate, right? It's really unfortunate that most of us, you think, live in that space without even realizing we're living in that space. It's unconscious. And then when you become aware of it, you're like, oh my God, my whole life has been like so, snapped out of present. And it's like,
Yeah. One final comment about being present. It's also being present for the not so great moments,
which
and
is really
experiencing
hard.
pain.
That's when we want to check out. Yeah.
And that is really hard to do. But when we find that we can be present in those moments where we are experiencing pain and recognizing that pain and leaning into it, it almost lessens it. And I mean, and we learn these lessons every day. And some days we do well, and some days we don't. And that's okay too.
Yeah. And, yeah. So I know you lost a friend a couple of years ago. Losing a friend is really hard, and anybody's hard, especially like friends. And I lost my brother a couple of years ago.
Oh,
It's
sorry.
been like super painful, right? And it's really like because people will assume that I don't feel the same amount of pain because I'm a medium, which is not true. And people have all these ideas like that about what it is that I do and how I feel grief and I haven't really felt my brother at all, which has been super confusing. And it's like, where are you? And so there's this guy. What is his name? He channels this entity called Bashar. Do you know who I'm talking about?
That rings a bell. Yes.
So the entity that he channels, the entity Bashar, said something really interesting about grief. And it was a mother asking, the channel this question about her son died. She's like, look, how do I know? How come my son doesn't come visit me or all these things? And so the entity said, if you're so in grief, you might think that these memories coming into your mind are you still grieving, but it's actually a visitation from your loved one. But you interpret it as you're grieving and you start crying and it's pain. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, that's so interesting. So now when I feel like I'm going into this place of really deep grief about my brother, which is also, it's okay to be in grief, not knocking that. It's absolutely okay. It just gave me a different way to look at it. It shifted my perspective. Like, do I have to cry over this right now? Is it grief or is it my brother visiting me? Just to have that thing, you know?
Just that slight shift in perspective, right? Then that creates that space that we talked about. But grief sucks, and grief doesn't go away.
No.
Yeah, and it pops up when you least expect it, and sometimes it pops up when you expect it.
Yeah.
And it's part of the human experience. And at the end of the day, if you are grieving a loss, it means you had something that was worth grieving in the first place.
Yeah.
And I would say, while my experiences over the last several years, some crazy experiences with the paranormal, they have definitely changed my relationship with death in a major way. They haven't necessarily changed my relationship with grief, right? I'm more comfortable with understanding that, okay, this person might be out of my physical reality, but that doesn't mean that they aren't still present, or that through my own intention to feel their presence, I can't feel them near when I need them most, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I always say too, like grief, you always will grieve that person, but you learn to walk with it differently, or you learn to walk with it. It becomes part of you. And that's the key, I think, is learning how to integrate those experiences into our beings, because I think we live in a culture that teaches us to push pain away, to hide pain, to pretend pain isn't happening to us because it makes everybody else around us uncomfortable. And so when you're socialized to experience pain that way, I think the coping mechanism is to shut down or to pretend it's not there, to hide in your grief, right? And that's ultimately really, really dysfunctional. And grief can be really beautiful. Like the emotions that come up, it's painful, but that pain is like showing you how much you love that person, right? There's that love there.
Right. Right. And then you can exist in that moment again too. I mean, you can exist in that moment that you're reminiscing about, can be very real, very much happening in the now.
Exactly. And I tell people too, just one more thing on the topic of grief and loss, and because a lot of times the people around the bereaved person, they want the person who's grieving to be better so they don't feel uncomfortable. So the other person around doesn't feel uncomfortable. And so I always say, check yourself. Are you saying all these things because you want to feel more comfortable because you're uncomfortable with somebody else's grief?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, how do we hold space for people that are grieving? Because sometimes you just need to sit with somebody and let them cry and let them have their pain and show up as a witness to their pain, right?
Yes. So they are seen. And the best way in those situations, because it's different for different situations, but in those moments of pure grief, it's just to sit with them, with them in that moment of just complete discomfort, Yeah. Wow. See, I told you these conversations, they go all they go on their own, and
Mhm.
I just race to keep up.
Yeah.
Speaking of intense emotions, on some of these investigations that I've seen you on, you've experienced, through psychometry or just through connecting with the spirits, some really, really traumatic events.
Yeah.
How do you manage that trauma, in the moment, and then two, after the investigation? How do you ground yourself, and how do you keep that separate so you are not, in essence, carrying this trauma that might have belonged to someone who was murdered, or
Mhm.
something else?
That is an excellent question. And if I were to practice all the things I've been preaching since the beginning of this interview, which, do as I say, not as I do, I would have to
Right.
say, like, ultimately, those experiences are all part of me and part of everyone and everything. And in general, I don't walk into any investigation from a place of fear.
Yeah.
I just don't, because that just sets me up for a bad experience, or it doesn't allow me to show up as an objective observer to what actually happened, because my job as a medium is to work for both sides, people here and people there, and sometimes we have to, like, uh, touch the darkness to get to the light. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
why is the spirit feeling this way? And can I help? Is there something I can do to help? And I don't do it perfectly. I mean, there are, like, especially when the network was like, we're going to give you another serial killer case. Like, the shock docs that I did, it was like Ed Gein and Danny
Oh yeah.
Rowan.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, I think there was one more. I'm like, oh my God, so many serial killers, right? Um, and so I tell people, like, those were some of the most difficult cases psychologically for me, because when you start to look into the mind of a serial killer, and you also see all of the abuse that they suffered as children, because most of the time it's like the perfect storm, uh, unless especially with Ed Gein and Danny Rowling. I mean, they both grew up in environments where they were severely abused by their parents, and it's like it's the perfect storm of all the things. And
Yeah.
so to see that, to see what they had done, to see dead bodies in your minds, it's a lot. And I do have somebody that I go to. Her name is Becca. In my phone, she's saved as Becca Magical Wizard, because I
I
don't know
love
what
that.
she does or how she does
Yeah.
it. She just, like, does it, and she clears, really good at clearing energy, or she's really good at showing you why that energy is with you, and helping you understand, like, well, is it serving a purpose, and what is that purpose, and can you let it go? So it's like holistic, right? It's integrating all.
Hmm.
So that was a little bit of a tangent, but the point is, like, um, you know, everything is connected, and to be able to really look at, why is that piece still with me? What can I do to integrate it, or to understand it,
Yeah.
and not be so afraid of it?
Yeah. Absolutely. And when we go out on investigations, our goal is so that these stories of these individuals that may otherwise have been, forgotten or left unseen, so they are seen, even if we leave carrying some sadness with us, it is serving a purpose,
Yeah.
right? Right. And I can't say that I've connected with anything super traumatic, or that I'm even sensitive in that way, but I still feel like to be able to experience whatever strong emotion, say that, we'll just say victim in this sense, but it could be, it could be across the gamut, but to be able to feel that emotion through them is giving them a voice in that moment where
Yeah,
maybe they didn't
absolutely.
have the opportunity to express that, you know what, this really sucked. and and
Yeah.
and I'm stuck here holding this myself, and to be able to share that with through someone connecting with them through an investigation, through reading, I think is I mean, there's one reason right there, right?
Absolutely. I totally agree. And that's a big part of doing this work, is to give a voice to, spirits, because they don't have a voice the same way that they used to. And
Hmm.
people oftentimes get their stories wrong. Can you imagine being on the other side and you're watching a medium, like, or like you're watching somebody tell your story completely incorrectly and you're like furious,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because that is not how it happened. It did not happen that way.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, and at the end of the day, I think certainly in the work that I've seen you do, through watching the Dead Files and the other series, Dead Files, which is a bit more intense, has
It's
more
so intense.
intense
I mean,
moments.
I like seriously, I have to give props to Amy because I don't know how she did 15 seasons of
Yes.
that
Holy
show.
smokes.
I mean, I did one season and I was like, this is so intense. I don't know how you do 15 seasons of this and have it not affect you. That feels impossible. Yeah.
But you're helping, it's helping the dead and helping the living. And honestly, who knows how much difference there really is between the dead and the living, other
That's
than
the point, right?
you know what I'm saying?
It's
Like, what
all
is
connected.
what is death? What is life? Right? It's all connected and all very mysterious and such a gift in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings us. We are nearing the end. There's so much more I want to talk to you about, so I'll probably have to bug you again.
I'd love to come back. This was great.
Once I cleanse the energy in this space. Honestly, I have never had so many problems technically before. This is brand new.
I mean, if you could see what's around me right now, there are probably 15 spirit drawings because I was doing art before.
Yes.
I was like,
oh my gosh,
who
we need
knows
to
what's
talk
in
about
this
that at
room
some
right
point.
now?
Yeah, your spirit drawings, some of them have literally like stolen my breath. So don't stop.
Thank you.
So this is the part of the show where I ask the don't turn around question. I gave you the heads up in the email. And so I'm just gonna say it flat out. Cindy, do you turn around?
Absolutely, I turn around, right? I think turning around helps me understand where I was, where I'm going, who I am. Not being afraid of looking at who I used to be, or my pain, or my shadow. But do I live turned around? Absolutely not. I think it's good to turn around for a moment, take a look, and then be back in your presence.
Yeah, great answer. And in the theme of our conversation today, who says that turning around is just not looking forward?
I think so. Absolutely. Right?
Cindy, this has been wonderful. What an incredible discussion. We'll have to do this again because, like I said, the pinball has been bouncing around this entire time we've talked. But until then, why don't you let my listeners know where they can find out about all the incredible things you do, about your teachings, about where you will be appearing? Where can they find out all this wonderful information?
Yeah. So you can find me at cindykaza.com or mediumcindykaza.com. You can find me on social media at Cindy Kaza, Facebook, Twitter is Medium Cindy Kaza, or X, whatever it's called now. I'm on I don't know. I'm on all the socials. So I do a lot of live events. I'm touring a lot. So if you get a chance, come out. Hopefully I'll be in a city near you. But I post all my classes to my website, social media, all the things. So yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Well, everyone, make sure to check that out. Thanks again, Cindy. And thank you to all of you for listening, for being part of this great community. Without you, there wouldn't be a show. So with that being said, we'll see you next time.
We just don't know what really causes this phenomenon. So this has been going on for a very long time, but every time it happens, the scientists come up with a new explanation for it. We just don't know what really causes this phenomenon. And that's what the witnesses are always describing, incredible as it is.
Great, I'm in.